Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1046th New Social Environment. My name is Chloe Stagaman and I'm Director of Programs here at the Rail. And I have the extreme joy to be your MC today for a conversation featuring Marcel Alcalá and Ksenia M. Soboleva. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Marcel Alcalá received their BFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. They have held solo exhibitions at Night Gallery, Mickey Gallery, and Deli Gallery, and exhibited in numerous institutions, including the Tom of Finland Foundation, where they were an artist in residence, and MCA Chicago. Alcalá is also a performer and writer, assuming a derisive alter ego named Payasa, the feminine form of the Spanish word for clown. Their performance work often tackles topics that feel otherwise taboo, specifically the artist's thoughts about race and gender politics and their personal experiences with these constructs. And our host today, Dr. Ksenia M. Soboleva, is a New York-based art historian specializing in queer art and culture. She holds a PhD from the Institute of Fine Arts at NYU with a dissertation on art, AIDS, and lesbian identity in the United States. Soboleva is currently working on a book project titled Friendship as a Way of Art, Queer Identity and Visual Citation, and co-editing with Stefani Quito, the first major publication on the lesbian gallery Trial Bloom. Her writings have appeared in Bomb, Hyperallergic, Ursula, and of course the Brooklyn Rail, as well as various exhibition catalogs and artist monographs. She teaches at the New School and NYU. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Ksenia to get.
Thank you so much, Chloe, and thank you to the Brooklyn Rail for making this possible. And thank you to Marcel for being here with me. And congratulations on your beautiful show titled Gayo Gallina. And I actually want to start by talking about the title because I know that it refers to roosters that are born with the featherings of a hen. So essentially genderqueer roosters. And that are then used in cockfights against more masculine presenting roosters. And the phrase then became a homophobic slur, particularly in reference to trans and non-binary people, but was then, as I understand it, reclaimed. And of course, reclaiming derogatory language is such a significant signature queer gesture. So how did you arrive at the title and this phrase?
I've been thinking about the title for a while when I painted this. I have like an original painting that's based off this concept. And when I was presented with the doing this show, I was like, okay, I'm gonna like focus on this one painting and the idea within this painting to create a broader grouping or series of paintings. And I've been spending a lot of time with my family more and more. And Mexican family, lots of parties, lots of reasons to link up. And I was hanging out with my cousin and we were smoking. And he was talking about this like butch lesbian in the pueblo and called her a Gayo Gallina. And I was like, wait, because like obviously Gayo Gallina means like female rooster. And I was like, tell me more about this concept. And then he told me what it meant. And it was like an endearing way of talking about a person, but I know that it also comes from like a derogatory term. And I feel like there's a lot of Mexican phrases that are supposed to be mean but tongue-in-cheek, and even within like my community, like there'll be people who have what is it called, like a fake name, like let's just say like anyways, like the fake name will be like very rude and about like someone's like biggest insecurity, but everyone laughs. Like if someone was too skinny, like they'll call him flaco. And yeah, I just like, I find myself like looking for those kinds of terms and reclaiming them.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I mean, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, it is so queer, right? I love calling people freaks, but you know, if like a straight person on the street calls my friend a freak,
we'll beat the shit out of them.
Yeah. I'm gonna have a problem.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to start off like using the actual like Gayo Gallina and the individual that represents the same thing in a series of paintings.
Oh wait, so the individual that your cousin was referencing is in the paintings?
No. They're not, but I just mean like
I'm like,
the
where are they? I didn't.
the literal rooster, the literal Gayo Gallina, and like myself or like the people around me who are also Gayo Gallinas.
And well, so on the one hand, it's about reclaiming this language, right? But also, I feel that your work, and we can go to some closer views of the paintings, you know, you are really mining Western art history and sort of claiming it for, you know, you're taking from it what you want, and really creating a counter archive by, you know, sort of referencing artists like Manet and Degas and Matisse, but then filling the paintings with queer subjects and queer references. And you know, there's this wonderful text by Louise Fishman, lesbian painter, from the 1977 Heresies issue, which was dedicated to lesbian artists. And she wrote this text, it was called something like How I Do It, Notes from a Lesbian Painter. And she said, sure, look at like the queer artists in history, etc. But it would be silly to not also look at Cézanne and Matisse. You know, take from it what you want. And I feel that as queer people, we get to, like, you know, when queer culture has claimed Madonna for themselves and people are like, well, Madonna is not queer. I'm like, we get to claim Madonna as queer.
Yeah.
You know, we get to claim whatever we want if it works.
Yeah, I mean like our you know, just understanding like the history of like queerness, especially just like within the last 30, 40 years. I think it's important to like take from this, from like these like white male painters in the like late 1800s and early 1900s who, you know, that's like all we see. So those forms still exist, and I just wanted to re-represent them and use it as like an archive to showcase like what I'm interested, which is like just being alive and just like me, you know, doing me and the people around me.
Yeah.
And using like the still life, using like the bar scene, you know, the auditorium, these spaces that everybody like exist in but are not necessarily represented. But also in terms of representation, it's also the only thing I know or care about are like my interests, and these are my interests.
Yeah, so the paintings often have or exclusively feature people that you know, right, from your own life, or queer icons, or and I wanted to talk a little bit about your background as a clown performer. Will you tell us a little bit about that? How that?
Yeah, so after graduating college, I was definitely like at art school in 2008 to 2012. I feel like identity was not interesting, or at least I was told it just wasn't really giving. It was more about like tech and like what does it mean to like go analog from digital, and it was like identity was being erased because of like the Western forms of making. So
and you went to Art Institute of Chicago.
Yeah, I went to SAIC. That's not to say that every artist was doing that, but that's just like what that's how I felt while I was there. I was also like 18 and being like, what is art? Like, I'm here because I want to know what art is. And I feel like after graduating, you know, the loans hit, I was broke as fuck, had to move back to California. I tried to move to New York, but then I was like, oh shit, I can't afford this. Like, this is crazy. I don't have a trust, so I really am a hustler baby. so I was like, okay, how do I make work in California? And I don't have money to make actual objects. So I would perform in light of like the beginning of Drag Race and like those kind of like performances online. And so I would decorate my body as a clown, because going to Mexico, I would see these performers everywhere. And then doing research about clowns, they're basically like the queer other that is able to talk about taboo conversations like class. And in England, there's a history of like race conversations, like white face clown is the ideal clown. Then there's the contra August clown, which is the clown that's like a little dirty, trying to clean themselves up to become the white face clown. And then there's the August clown, which is basically the homeless doll. And so I used social media to like turn out looks and lie and say that I was performing. And then through lying that I was a performer, I ended up getting jobs doing performances at clubs in LA, like Mustache Mondays, or like doing like Ace Hotel, or doing gallery stuff. But what was funny is I didn't really know what my performance was, right? I was just like serving looks online. And then I realized that I could use poetry and DJing and sound mixing to create these performances, and then use the clown as an archetype to like either DJ as a clown, or I do like a poetry reading as a clown, or I do like a body performance without text as a clown, and use that like artifice to talk about how, honestly, just how I was feeling.
It's so funny. I didn't know that we share this, because, I recently did a clown performance, and which was, my friend was hosting a performance evening that was clown themed. And I had told them that, the first thing that I wanted to be as a child, as a little baby dyke in Russia, was a clown. I really wanted to be a clown. And then I used that invitation to perform as an excuse to think through that desire. And I realized that, yes, in Russia, the clown to me represented the only queer thing that I had as a reference material for a figure whose failure didn't result in
Banishment.
violence and yeah, exactly. Clowns would fall and people would cheer. They weren't laughing at the clown falling. They were laughing at, I read this, there's this wonderful book, Animal Joy, by Alice Adir Noir. I probably mispronouncing it, but at some point she says that the people don't laugh at clowns because they fall. They laugh at our attempt to go through life staying upright and not falling, and I think that's so profound. So as I was writing this piece for this performance, I talked to a friend of a friend who's a professional clown named Donna Oblongata, who everybody should look up, is really amazing, and is going to have a performance in August in New York. And she told me that being a clown is actually, it's not about faking something or becoming like a persona outside of yourself, but actually it's coming in touch with your deepest emotions.
Exactly. And then you can use the artifice to propose these ideas when you may not feel comfortable to do it as yourself in everyday life.
Yeah. And, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, in a way, it's like a shield.
Yeah. She also said the nose is the smallest mask. The clown nose is the smallest mask. Yeah, it's profound.
So cute. I'm writing that down.
So and I was thinking, I found myself recently saying something about, I was like, well, this is performative affection. I realized that I was using performative as a way of implying that it wasn't sincere.
Mhm.
And then I was like, wait, but why? Why am I equating performativity with fakeness or insincerity?
Right. Right.
So I'm trying to deconstruct that for myself. So it's really interesting to then think of you doing like a fake performance on social media leading up to then having a real performance, but of course both are equally real and both are equally fake. And
Exactly. And like the identity of the clown and the history of the clown allows for that to exist and to work, I guess, you know. I'm always like searching like for those moments where I have like justification of pure freedom. And I felt like this entity was like a perfect way to showcase that, like those conversations. And while doing it, I started realizing that I think it also just came from just like my childhood as well. I grew up with my brother's a santero and he lived with me my whole life. So we grew up like, you know, sacrificing animals to gods and like using the power of the drumming and beat to get possessed through like adornment and objects and like orbs that like hold these pieces. And I have like a very like one of the most like traumatizing moments and also beautiful moments was when I had to sacrifice a chicken as like a 13-year-old. And I was like crying. It like fucked me up, but now I see it as this like kind of transformative moment. And now seeing like my show subconscious moment of like re-representing these pieces. But
wow. Yeah.
just like I hate using the word like dichotomy all the time, but like, you know, I lived through that shit. Like in Santeria tradition, the first orisha that you're kind of presented with is El Egua, which is the orisha of dichotomy, of like left, right, yes or no. And you kind of use shell readings to make choices. And I feel like, and he's also known as the trickster.
It's
And
like Hecate in
yeah, exactly.
mythology, who is like the queer saint basically, and in RuPaul's Drag Race, where the most recent one, the winner was like, and to Hecate. You know, it's like queer people have really claimed Hecate.
I love Drag Race, but we'll leave that to another time. Yeah, so I feel like I'm always trying to find the trickster position, and I feel like growing up as a queer person, you're told that you're a trickster.
Totally.
And so I just relate. I'm like, I was told this my whole life.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where the
Yeah.
performances came from. And
And
also,
also, sorry, you go.
I was just gonna say, like, through like in performances, you know, like especially as like in my early 20s, I was like drinking, smoking, like, and using those inhibitions to access performance, which is also the way a lot of people, they use that and the drumming music, aka la fiesta, to get possessed by spirits.
I was gonna say that also there's something about, you know, being queer children and wanting to be funny because it's better if they laugh at us than, you know, the other alternative.
Oh my God, the way I use comedy as a shield is just every day, not struggle.
And the clown is, you know, the clown is also tragic, right? That is, yeah, what the clown does.
And like speaking of tragedy, I feel like towards like I still do performances, but not as regularly. I think like after a while, then you start being used as like the comic relief in exhibitions, like object exhibitions, museums and galleries. And then, so I did have a moment like towards the end of my like frequent performance moment where I was like, I'm not getting paid well. Like, it's getting dark over here. So
I'm gonna start painting.
well, I mean, kind of. I was still broke, so I found that like making drawings was probably more what I should start focusing my time on, because I really, want to survive as an artist. I don't, and I wasn't the amount of emotions I was giving as a performer wasn't being given back, I think, in the way that I wanted.
Mhm.
And so now when I do performances, it's really way more calculated, thought out, written, and I want a budget, And I feel like with drawings, it was more like I could travel and like make drawings and try to sell them to people, because, let's not get it twisted. Like to make is also giving to the world, I think, and you gotta get paid right. Like, what the hell? So when I started making drawings, I used this like years of like the idea of comedy and tragedy through clowning to create my girlies, were my like queer non-binary girlies, which were smiley and sad face drawings.
Mm.
And I did that for many years and would just hustle them out to everybody, force everyone, all the queens to buy a piece.
Mm.
And then when
And-
wait,
Sorry.
what?
I was gonna ask, had you already been drawing and painting in grad school?
I didn't go to grad school after my BS.
Sorry, I'm American terminologies. In undergrad?
Oh, in undergrad, I was like basically taking like a painting class and then being like, I'm gonna perform in this class, and then taking a video class and being like, I'm taking still photography images, and just doing the opposite of every class.
Mhm.
And I feel like most of my time at school was just meeting the people around me, spending time in Chicago and like the noise and like witch house scene, and just being young and coming out and hooking up with everybody to figure out who I was.
Yeah.
As we do. So I
Amen.
feel like I wasn't really making, I don't even think I like was making work. I was in process the whole time.
So how recently did you turn to painting?
Painting came to me through the pandemic.
God bless. Wow.
I was living, it was kind of like in between, like right before the pandemic and the pandemic. I was living at the Tom of Finland Foundation. I was doing a lot of erotic smiley sad face drawings. And through that, I was connected with the Tom of Finland Foundation. And I had a breakup in New York and moved back to LA, and they offered me to live there graciously. Dirk and Sharp, I love them over there. And I had time, I had a wooden panel, so I started painting, and then the pandemic hit, and I was living by myself. And this artist, Ben Noam, offered me a studio for free. And so I took it. And then when the 10K hit, I was like, sick. I'm just gonna like try canvases out. And just started making some paintings. And the owner of Night Gallery, Davida, who I'd known for years through my performance practice, went to go visit that studio, was visiting another artist, and just looked in and saw my paintings and just like urged me to keep painting. And then I would say like 9 months later, they offered me my first painting solo show at the gallery.
Wow. That's a great story.
Yeah, I just I feel so blessed by those queens, by the Night Gallery queens.
Yeah, I like Night Gallery. They represent Amy Adler, yes?
Yeah, or at least so.
That show. Brilliant. So to what extent, or what are the ways in which, academics' favorite phrase, what are the ways in which you think performance is still present in your paintings?
I still will do maybe a perform here and there, but I think just, oh my God, it's like really cheesy to say it, but I am interested in the persona of the artist and like the ephemera that comes out of the experience of living.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, like I feel like like living that like punk life and mentality is a part of it, and like making the objects is also performative. And I like the act of being an artist is also performative. Even like this right now, let's having a conversation about practice is like, what, so I think like no matter what, that performer in me has been since I was a child, going to these tambores and deciding to be an artist is like its own thing. And painting performers, painting like friends, scenarios is a part of it. I also I have a writing practice too that informs the works. And yeah, it's all a part of it, right? It's all a part of the experience of being or making.
It's funny, I was talking to my students about performance art and then, documenting performance art, and whether the documentation of performance art is then performative in its own right, and then we went down a very slippery slope. And then by the end of the class, I was like, listen, you could argue that all art is a documentation of a performance, because the act of art making is a performative process. Boom.
And time connects it all, right?
Yeah.
And so the object is the ephemera of the moment, whether there's an audience or there isn't an audience.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I want to have an audience, especially in my 20s, fresh, young look. And now I think when I hit my 30s during the pandemic, I was like, okay, I can still create like these works that have the same idea, but they're objects. And I do like the decorative. And I think like being a queer Mexican, it's like decorative AF. But what's fun, or what I've been thinking a lot about now, is that to remind myself that like mediums should be used to be tools, and that like my work can consistently change visually and still have intent, and try not to get into this like, this is my only brand vibe.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about, the many layers of identity in your work and life, queer, gender fluid, Mexican, American, and the shitty art world that we live in, is such that institutions in particular really like to impose sort of fixed notions of identity onto us, right? So
and what happens when you're when there's multiple layers of identity? I don't think it's like easy. It's not an easy way to define a practice or work. And I always think about like white abstraction and like the privilege of making that kind of work, and I want the same privilege. I think like working with figures, or working with text, or working with like cartoony, I mean, I feel fine, but I can see how it works out here. And I live my like queer joy within my community. And then when I get pulled into like certain situations, I'm like, oh my God, like I'm still like not gaining access to certain things, and low key, I know why. And I'm like, oh my God, like what the fuck? Like, this is crazy. Like, I don't want to be treated differently, right? Like, I'm special. I just don't want to be treated differently.
Sure. I know. I always have this thing where I do want to remain different. Like I don't, but I guess maybe the correct terminology is that I just like to feel special. Because, I think that difference is really at the root of queer identity and desire. And so whenever people try to like flatten that, it's just becomes less interesting to me.
Yeah, don't flatten my ass. Like, I've been like repressed as a child for so long for being different, and like now, hell yeah, I'm different. but don't remind me of my childhood. Praise the work. No, I don't know. Praise the practice.
But also, it's like we're in this moment where, on a superficial level, right? It's one could argue that I mean, this is a controversial thing to say, but everyone is queer, right? Everyone is queer. But when you're queer, something will always remind you that you are actually different, like not having access to something, you know, and
or just walking in a certain kind of a room.
Yeah. So, actually, since you mentioned abstraction, there were a few works. There's one in particular, I think it's flowers, but they kind of look like clits, and it like taps, it sort of flirts with abstraction.
Wait,
There's one more. No, but this one, you know what, this one made me think of, you know, Annie Sprinkle's idea of being pollen amorous, like pollen.
no, but love her. Is she still in San Francisco?
I think she's in California. I think maybe she's in LA. Yes, this one. So I wanted to ask you about your flirtation with abstraction and whether you think that's maybe a direction that you might be moving, because yes, exactly. In many ways, you know, I'm very interested in queer abstraction because in many ways one could argue that it does that is better suited to represent the queer experience, right? That by moving away from trying to represent, you know, a body, because once you represent the body, people rush to classify it.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely like, I'm thinking about this a lot right now. After a show, I usually take time, go to nature, and then process and think about like what kind of work can I make? What kind of work have I made? And yeah, I mean, this was I was thinking a lot about the angel's trumpet, which there's a plant that I grew up with in my family's home, and it's one that in which honestly, when I look at it, I'm like, that's my type.
Mm-hmm.
It also happens to be a flower that if you consume it, you trip out and potentially die. It's like pretty.
That's my type. Love a femme fatale.
Yeah, so I feel like with this piece, I was trying to like locate that in space and connect it to the Gayo Gallina conversation through these like kind of like silver charms, which a lot of cockfighting, they have silver charms that they use, and like some daggery ones that cut. But I was just having like yeah, in a way it is like the way you create an abstract painting through like feeling. And that's why I like a lot of like Mexican artists, is because a lot of it is through feeling. But I feel like I'm still wondering what an abstract painting looks like for me, and I definitely want to play with that like soon.
Yeah, and of course that's a binary too, figuration versus abstraction, you know. Like I can look at the most figurative work and my experience of it will be abstract because I won't be able to relate to it in the same way that, you know, I look at a painting by Agnes Martin, who was a lesbian, and it profoundly resonates, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, that's how I feel about abstract painting too, because it's like, okay, you look at the abstract painting, okay, do I like it or not? And then who is the individual? And that's why I say like artist as performer and like experience. It's like, okay, do I like the painting? Does it look good? Oh, okay, blah 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 blah. But then who is the individual and like why are they making this kind of work? Then it's like, okay, let's go, bitch.
Yeah, exactly. So some of the works in the show are oil on canvas, then others are gouache on paper and also watercolor on paper, or it's
they're all gouache. I believe they're all gouache.
Is gouache watercolor? It is a watercolor, right?
It's like kind
Here
of.
comes the art historian. Okay, so
it's not watercolor then. but it's like that NB acrylic and gouache.
So how do you navigate between those materials? And also, I would love to just hear more about your process of painting. Like, do these paintings begin with a sketch? Do you use photography? Do you ever paint from life? How's that?
Yeah, so in terms of like oil versus gouache, the paperworks are like more immediate and they remind me of my practice right before painting, where I'll be home and have an idea and then I'll make a gouache piece. And I feel like the girlies are a part of that practice for me. They're like quick to make, they're super like fun for me. And it's a moment where I don't have to think too much, which I find is super important in my practice.
Mm.
And then with oil painting, I feel like it's more a research-based, like, why am I presenting this? I think the weight of the history of painting is like right here. Like with gouache, it's like, I don't give a fuck. Like, we're having fun, girl. It's giving, like, for me, it's like when the ancient dolls were painting flowers, I'm like,
Mm.
but with the oil painting, I'm like, this is my opportunity to create a conversation and yeah, so that's how oil painting came into the mix. It's more like a research-based time. I do sketches now. And more I'm starting to do like underpaintings and like really figure out like how you make a fucking painting. Because I came to it real quickly. Like I was just like, okay, let's like try shit out.
Mm.
And I mean, I feel like the work is even, yeah, the oil painting takes more time. I have to be more like reflective and like curious.
But it
Um,
also allows for more time, right? You can sort of play within the oil because it doesn't dry instantly, right?
but
So
like we were talking to like before this, I'm an Aries, so I need like immediate pleasure. And so the gouache works help with that. Also, poetry and writing helps with that. And performing.
do you ever incorporate text into your, oh, well, actually there is that, there is the watercolor that has text, the gouache that has text, this body is limiting.
I've been thinking a lot about text in painting and like what is a painting like, or just like painting with just text. And yeah, I don't want to talk about it because I feel like if I mention a text that goes on a painting, it's like that is the work. But yeah, I've been thinking about it a lot. Like like I love text painting. Like
Um,
give me an idea and I'm gonna run with it. I'm gonna be
yeah,
like, oh, what?
there's a cute Virginia Woolf text about painting where she says that she considers painting to be like the superior medium.
Okay.
And I mean, also when you read like To the Lighthouse, it's so, Lily, the painter, it's so descriptive. It's like she was trying to make a painting.
I think with this, like the idea of like painting being superior, I think that kind of notion is also because it's the most accessible. So which I think is important and I love that shit. But I do think all mediums have different capacities depending on the audience, like as like us, like art girly, like if if I see a performer or like a little gesture, I'm like, yes, bitch. Um, but like for me, also accessing painting was a way to communicate with my family and like my
Yeah.
parents for them to have like a access into my art journey because I didn't want to make work that totally like pushed away like the people in my life who wouldn't understand, yeah, like minimalism or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, going back to the medieval times, it's like illustrations came in for people that couldn't read, right? So it was a different kind of language to make something
Yeah,
accessible. Um, yeah, that's interesting. And then in terms of your subjects, what is your relationship to your subjects and how do you know that you want to paint someone?
I think it's really dependent on like who I'm surrounding myself in the moment of creating the work.
Hmm.
There's always like scenarios that I research, like this Remy, I don't know how to say his last name, Koch's painting, the cockfight, where like I see an image like that and I'm like, okay, like who should I paint in it? And also, do they want to be in it? So I also asked them like, hey, do you mind being in this painting? Because I'm still insecure about like my figure painting. Like, do you want to be in it? It probably ain't gonna look like you, but I don't care. I'm having fun. And if they say yes, then I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like, especially in this moment where it's like, why did you represent the person? And did they say it's okay? Even though like fuck that, but I'm generous and I'm nice, so I'm gonna ask.
Can we go to the painting where the watching of the cockfight? Because I noticed in the press release it said that you included one of your fellow residents from Fire Island, and that's where I met you, so I know the cohort. And I was like, wait, who?
I'm not
I was
gonna
like,
tell you.
is it the one? Is the one on the left? Is that
No,
Kayla?
all the way in the right. I was trying to paint Joseph.
Oh, that's Joseph. Oh, I see. I see. Yeah. You know, I considered it for a second.
Yeah, I'm also like just like you just have to tell yourself fuck it. Like I think every time I make a work I'm like fuck it, because a part of making is like the insecurity is just like like why do you think that this is important and like what. And I think coming from a performance background, conceptual art background, and going into painting, I'm like, oh shit, because a lot of painting that's like this is good, it's formal as fuck, very time consuming, and like the layers, the blah, like projectors, like whatever. And I'm just a feeling based queen.
Yeah.
So representing figures, I'm like, ah, but I'm just like, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, who says that it has to be mimesis, you know, and
Right.
or that's I you know, I teach queer history of photography, and I'm constantly asking my students, you know, why does photography has such a truth value? I can look at a photograph of myself and think, this looks nothing like me. This is not what I look like. And then I can see a painting, like, you know, I had the great honor of being painted by Angela Dufresne. I always mispronounce her name, I think. But you know, and I look at that painting and I feel that she saw me. I feel that that painting really captures my essence. And then I showed that painting to friends and who have said, "Oh, that doesn't really look like you." And somebody said, "Oh, she made you look like her," which I love. um, you know, and so I just, yeah, I feel that you know, there's such a fixation on
Literalness or like
yeah, like appearance. Um,
well, especially with like social media, it's like how do I appear? Like,
yeah,
do I appear how I see myself or how others see myself?
yeah. Well, and as my friend Rachel Stern says, you know, you can look at a photograph of yourself, and if you think that's not what I look like, actually, yeah, that might not be what you look like, because the lens is also, photography is mediated, right? You can point a lens in a certain way. You can, so
Every hot pic of myself is myself. Period. Just kidding.
um, what I loved about this painting in particular, by the way, is on the left on the floor you see like the parts of the roosters, and it taps into, because some, you look at your work and it's like bright and colorful, and you know there's like celebration, um and then there it taps into violence, and it made me think of Francis Bacon as well.
Ugh, mother.
Yeah.
Gay mama.
Can you talk a little bit about that? And have you ever seen a cockfight?
I haven't, but like I've obviously been around a lot of roosters and I've, you know, killed sacrificed
Yeah,
roosters.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I mean, the reason I've never gone to one is because I'm like, oh my God, like, is that fucked up? I mean,
Yeah.
and now I'm like, this is just what some people do, you know, like that's their sport. I don't condone cockfighting, but I thought it was like a really good metaphor for my for my experience, especially with the Gayo Gallina as like the ultimate fighter and like whipping this fool's ass. Like I want to see this scenario.
Yeah. And also in a way it is like the queer version of bullfighting, you know, like bulls are so
I might go to
it's so
Spain this summer, and I really want to go to one because I'm very curious. Their outfits are so gay. I love it.
That's true. That's true. Picasso painted all those bullfights.
Oh, Picasso painted everything. That bitch just took everything.
Did he paint cockfights ever?
Mm, I'm not sure, but I'll Google it after, and I'm sure he did. And it's like a circle, like with a fucking.
So, talking about art history, who are some of your, role models or artists that you have turned to in art history that, that are not?
I feel like
Yeah.
recently, like in my studio, I like wrote down like on charcoal like 3 people that I feel like I really fuck with, and it was like Anna Mendieta, Frida Kahlo, and Francis Bacon.
Hmm.
And in terms of like contemporary painters, I think Noah Davis. I met him like back in the days, and I was just like, this dude is so amazing. When I was at like before it was the Underground Museum, and then I love Jennifer Packer.
Mhm.
But yeah, I feel like the grannies I'm really into, like Frances Pacabia, and Monet. I love Monet and Diego, just like
Yeah.
the dolls.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I also wanted to ask you about scale, how you approach that. Like, how do you know when a painting is going to be small or large?
I am literally an improvisational queen. Like if I see a canvas, I'll just buy it and I'll be like, okay, how do we work with this size? You can see it in the show. Like there's no like every painting is the fucking same size. It's like they're all, even the 2 largest ones are different,
Mhm.
different sizes. But I've been like, I kind of want to be like, okay, what does it look like to make work the same size? But I'm so improv. I'm so like I like working scale to scale depending on what I have available to me, and that's just because that's who I am as an artist and how I've been as an artist. Just like depending on what I have access to, then I'll create something for the audience.
Mhm.
So it's kind of interesting now where it's like planning shows and stuff and being like, okay, like do they all look the same?
Mhm.
Um
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
all different, they're all different sizes depending on like what I had. And I feel like when people are interested in having a show, I like just look at what I have and I'm like, okay, like I'm gonna fill these girls up, and then the concept will bring the work together.
And since we originally met on Fire Island, one more question that I have for you is how you are informed by your literal surroundings and how that experience was for you being on Fire Island, and whether there's any work that has arisen from that.
I made one painting after it that I showed at the Armory, which was definitely like a like surrealist version of like being in the forest and the water. Um, I'm a nature girl. If I'm not, and I swim, I love swimming. So if I'm not making stuff, I'm dipped in water.
Mm.
Um, so it was a nice experience to be there. Also, it's a place that I wouldn't have access to otherwise, right? So um, I think like developing relationships with the artists that I was with was super inspiring, and having the luxury to be in this kind of like fucking vacation town.
Mhm.
Was amazing. I still haven't like made a series of work about it, but it was cool.
Mhm. And being in LA,
I mean, and yeah, what do you mean being in LA?
like, do you find that when you're in New York, you're thinking differently about your work?
Yeah, and I think that's like a queer concept, right? It's like, okay, where am I? I'm influenced by my surroundings depending on the space that I'm in. And it's interesting that I say that though, because I was just in Utah visiting my nephew, who's like a cis straight, you know, engineer fisherman. And he was saying bro all the time. And as someone who's always like, sis, girl, I was like, okay, like, sup, bro. Like, hey, bro. And now I kind of want to bring bro into like queerness and be like, hey, bro. Because I think like it's all like it's actually just terms of endearment for your people, right? So I was just like, I was going back with him like, hey, bro. And then he would go, what's up, girl?
Yeah. Well, queerness is in the eye of the beholder, right?
Exactly. Anything other, it's like, what the hell?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we're just like living on the.
Well, Marcel, thank you so much. I have to sign off soon because I'm about to teach my queer history of photography class, as you know. But this was such a pleasure, and I hope we have some questions from the audience. And congratulations again on the beautiful show. And I can't wait to see what you do next. And also, I'm selfishly hoping that there will be some performance in the future as well, so I can see it.
I mean, let's hang out soon. I'll hit you up when I'm in New York, or hit me
Please,
up if you're in LA.
please do.
Besos.
Thank you so much, Marcel and Ksenia. That was amazing and really, really lovely to listen to. Eleanor and I have a couple of questions, and then we'll conclude today. But Eleanor, you want to go first?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Marcel and Ksenia. This has been so, so amazing. I am really wondering about color, and I'm wondering about color in your visual art and also in your costumes for your performances, and if there is maybe overlap or relationship between those, or just if you could speak to both in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I'm like staring like at I'm visiting my family and I'm staring at like this like colorful garden right now. And I just think like a part of, at least I'm just gonna say for me, like the Mexican experience is like color on top of color on top of color on top of color, pure pigment on. And I'm still developing my relationship to color in terms of creating my own, because I definitely come from like gouache and pastel where I'm like working with the like pure pigment. But yeah, I think just like the experience is right. And even in a moment where like shit is crazy out here, it's always been crazy. Fighting for that light is super important to the practice. Because not gonna lie, it can be dark too. Ah. But color is super important to being. Period.
Thank you.
Great
A
question,
composition.
Eleanor.
Oh, what?
Sorry, Marcel, go ahead.
I was gonna say like composition, still trying to figure that bitch out, but we're gonna figure it out.
I liked that question a lot. Thank you, Eleanor. And thanks for that answer, Marcel. I was just wondering, I loved when you said Frida Kahlo as one of your influences, and I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on the role of the surreal in your work. You know, how do you think about the surreal when you come to a new drawing or to a new painting?
Yeah, I think with surrealism, like, you know, you're accessing figure and then you're accessing the idea of abstraction and kind of bringing the two together to create a vibe, a feeling. And I think the reason why I'm so connected to that is because, yeah, like I want to create like a story that is a vibe. if that I mean, period. And that's just a big part of like Mexican artwork, or like Latin artwork, is this like interest in the magical surrealism, which is like, I feel like how I've lived my life. And being othered as a kid, I'm like, I feel like I'm like in this like spiritual other space. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's it.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Thank you so much for today. Thank you for your generosity, and thank you to Ksenia for all those questions. Thank you to the team at Marlborough and the team at Night Gallery for helping us prepare today. And thank you.
All y'all.
Yeah, that was amazing. All of that support was really amazing. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art, who sponsor our new social environment program and make daily conversations like this one possible. They also support our archive, where you'll be able to watch this video shortly. The Rail has been free and independent for 23 years, 24 this fall, and a donation directly supports our writers, production staff, and operations. You can support our work through the link in the chat. And if you're free tomorrow at 1 p.m., join us for a conversation with Fabian Treber and Andrew Woolbright on the occasion of It's Not Late, It's Only Dark. And as is real tradition, you can now turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you so, so much for being here today. And thank you, Marcel. That was such a joy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.